talk about this. What makes an athlete? Yeah, we're gonna have, I told you, we're gonna have fun, right? What do you think? What does it take to make an athlete? What comes to mind? What does someone need to do to become a good a sport player? What do they need to be a basketball player? What do they have to do? Go ahead, tell me one. Devotion. Oh, very good. Did you read my slides? That was excellent. What's your name? Your name? Ethan. Tell me your, I know your name. Tell me your answer.
You have to work a lot.
Very good. You have to work hard. Anything else? Persistence. Persistence. Very good. Anyone else? Anything else that comes to mind? What is this? So all I heard was hard work, persistence. That's it. That's all we need. Sacrifice. Anything else?
What's the question?
What makes an athlete?
Playing a sport.
You gotta play a sport. You gotta pick a sport, right? What else? Huh? Strength. Well, let me tell you what comes to mind for me. Go ahead.
You need a lot of people to play.
You need, okay.
Friends.
You need some friends. You need other people to play with you. Good. All right. For me, I think the first thing that you need to be a professional athlete, you need to understand the sport. You got to know the sport, right? And what do I mean by that? You have to know the rules of the sport. If you're going to play basketball, you have to know that you cannot walk around with the basketball without dribbling, right? You got to know the rules of the sport. You got to study it, you got to learn it, and you got to ask questions. Second thing, I think a lot of you said this, practice. Practice, right? If you want to be good at something, you have to put the time in. You have to practice. You have to train, you have to work on strength, right? You have to work out, maybe play in scrimmages or practice games, right? And you have to put everything into practice, right? What we learn needs to be put into action when it comes to sport. Third thing, this one no one said, and I never think of this one, diet. Right? Diet, right? Working out is great.
That's what sacrifice is all about.
That's true. I mean, you make that argument. Then I can put that in all the categories then, right? Diet. Working out is great, right? But if you don't have a good diet, what will happen? It's pointless, right? What will happen?
You would not have that much strength.
Yeah, you won't have strength. You won't have enough to fuel your body, right? With the right nutrients to make sure it's at peak condition, right? Last but not least, coaching. You need to have a coach. You need to have someone who is good at the sport to guide you, to teach you. At least you need to know someone who knows the sport well, right? And whenever we think of athletes, these are the people that we normally think of, right? Right? These are the people we normally think of, right? Tamar, he's doing amazing, by the way, right now. I don't know how long it's going to last, but forever.
Better than the Knicks.
All right, let's not go there. Let's not go there. We're already in enough pain, okay? You don't need to go there.
Better than the Falcons.
Michael Jordan's right there, right in the middle, right? These are who we think of when we think of athletes, right? And many more. Well, there are also others who we think as athletes, right? Not just physical athletes. These are also athletes. We should be thinking of these individuals when we think of athletes. Now, granted, Paramenatiribin is not dunking a basketball, right? That's not what I mean. But they are spiritual athletes. Spiritual athletes. Now, why am I taking so much time to go over all this? The goal of every Christian is to enter the kingdom of heaven, right? We've all heard this, right? And to do that, we have to be Christ-like, right? How? Well, you guys have heard that the path to the kingdom of heaven is the straight and narrow path, right? We've all heard that. In one form or another, we've heard that. And that only very few travel this path because of how difficult it is. Whenever I hear of straight and narrow path, I often think of one of those small roads in India that no car should be driving on, but somehow they get 2 buses, 3 auto rickshaws, and some animals, right? And then you're in the back saying, oh, Jesus, take the wheel, I don't know where I'm going, right? It's interesting, though, because the path is like that. These saints have traveled it. But the interesting thing is this, after they've traveled it, they've paved the road. They paved the road. Think about that for a second. They paved the road so that it'll be easier for us to follow it. Because they told us some of the steps that we need to follow. If you can't see where you're going, but you know somebody who's already went there, and it's telling you, take a right here, take a left here, it's kind of easier to get there, right? That's what the saints do. That's what the saints do. Now, the interesting thing is this. All of these individuals trained up to become a spiritual athlete. That's the path. And it's interesting. A lot of the stuff that they do is what physical athletes do to train. And I'm going to explain how. I'm going to remind you for a second what some of the things that we talked about, physical athletes, right? You have understanding the sport, you practice, you diet, and you need coaching, right? You remember that, right? That's what we agreed upon, right? Or at least that's what I agreed upon, all right? Well, the spiritual athlete is not that much different, okay? There is a great comparison here for spiritual athletes and physical athletes. I think it's going to help us understand what we need to do to work on our spiritual lives using this framework, right? So let's start. So I said, if we're going to relate this, let's work on this together. I said, to be a good physical athlete, you need to understand the sport. How can I take that and apply it to a spiritual athlete? What do you guys think?
You can like understand how to be people of God.
Yes, very good. You have to understand the faith. Just like a physical athlete needs to understand the sport, a spiritual athlete, a saint, needs to understand the faith. Now, let me ask you guys something. Why, when it comes to athletes, why do we say it's important to know the sport? Why? Yeah.
So that you know how to play it.
Gotta know how to play the game. You have to know how to play the game. You need to know the rules. You need to know the purpose. You need to know the strategy and how to play the sport. If you don't understand the sport, you can't succeed. Period. It's the same thing with this being a spiritual athlete. If you don't understand the guidelines of the church, you cannot succeed in living a Christ-like lifestyle, in being a spiritual athlete. We have to spend the time studying the faith, and that's reading the Bible, reading the scriptures at home, reading the prayers of the church at home, right? To be a great champion of any sport, you gotta know the rules and strategies of what great players did in the past. To be a champion of orthodoxy, to be a champion of Christ, you have to do the same. And it means doing things like this, attending SGOCE sessions, going to Sunday school, right? And it's not enough just to learn these things, right? We gotta put it to use, right? What's the point of just putting things in your head and not putting it to use? The things that we talk about shouldn't just take up space in our head. But whatever we put into use, we will never forget. Let me give you an example. We don't ever forget to brush our teeth, right? I hope not. Right? Why?
Because if we don't, or like our teeth will be like bad.
Yeah, our teeth will be bad, but how do you remember to brush your teeth?
You can remember like if you can do every morning. Every night before you go to bed, you can like write on a piece of paper, and you can put it in your bathroom. Then
Very good. It's a routine, right? It becomes a routine. Do you have something else?
Yes, it has to become your habit.
Your habit. What else did you have?
Memorize.
Memorize. It has to be part of your life, right? It's got to be part of your life. If you understand the faith and you take the central examinations. Do we still do central examinations? We do, right? You take the central examinations. Shows how much I know. You take the central examination, you get a first rank. So what? If you don't apply it into our lives, then first rank doesn't mean anything. The biggest rank is to be Christ-like. To take what we learn in the Sunday school textbooks and put it and use it in our lives, whatever it may be. Now, I'm not dissing the Sunday school curriculum, it's actually excellent. But we have to use that and apply it in our lives. It's the same thing in our faith. And that brings me to this, right? We gotta practice the faith, right? Practice the faith, and these are all things that we do. Why do we practice a sport? Somebody tell me. Why do we practice a sport?
We practice sports so we can be good at it.
Yeah, and we can prepare for the game, right? Yeah.
Being professional.
Being professional athletes, right? We practice our faith. We have to be professional Christians, right?
Like you, all the athletes have to be good at like doing the Bible.
Yeah, we all have to read the Bible and practice it, right? When we say that we read the Bible, we do the prayers, we attend the holy sacraments, we participate in charity events, we live the faith in our daily lives, right? This is how we live it out, right? What we learn from the writings of the Father, we live it, and that practice becomes a habit. Once we routinely do these things, it'll shock you how much it changes your lives. It really does. And then these things will become part of our core being. Now, that's the goal of all this, right? It's a transformation of being into Christ-like individuals. This is what practice does. Now, we got to talk about dieting. That's fasting, right? Let somebody tell me, why do athletes restrict unnecessary high-calorie food? Anybody know why? Yeah.
Because then they'll like more fat, and then that will stop them.
Very good, right? It's to avoid empty calories. Yeah.
And now, if you do that, it'll like your body will start like to be like really big, and you wouldn't like get to play anything.
Yeah.
You lose the strength.
You lose your strength. They avoid empty calories because they don't want food that weighs them down for a workout, right? They're not gonna go eat a banana cream pie or something. What did we eat today? We had some.
What do we have?
French toast. We had so much food today.
Oh, we did.
I could barely speak right now how much food I ate. But see, that's the thing, right? You overeat, right? You do these things and it weighs you down and prevents you from doing the things that you need to do from an athlete perspective, right? Now, it's interesting. What do you do when you're full? Tell me the truth. Somebody in the back. No, you guys are very good. You get a gold star. Somebody else tell it to me, right? What do you do when you're full?
Sleep.
You go to sleep, right? It's kind of hard to pray when your stomach is full. You're not sleeping. You get the itis and you pass out. That's what happens, right? That's what happens. Happens to be plenty, right? But if we participate in fasting, we restrict our caloric intake, and what happens is we have more time to pray. Think about all the time. Let's think about like Lenten season. Notice that when you're not in Lenten season, we spend a lot of hours in the kitchen preparing food. But when it's Noem season, we're not really in the kitchen all that much. We have like all this extra time. That extra time is supposed to be used in prayer. We save time. We also save calories because instead of us thinking about, oh, I'm so full, we use that energy to pray, to dedicate ourselves over and over again to come closer to God. It's the same thing, right? Just like the energy that's used in good food for athletes, fasting gives us strength in the spiritual realm, relying on God. Now, what do you think about coaching? Yeah.
You probably need like a coach to like guide you to the right path.
Spiritual father, right? When it comes to coaching in the spiritual realm, spiritual father, right? Now, in sports, to be good at something, you have to train with someone who knows the sport. Some great coaches were players before. But in the context of a spiritual athlete, it's a spiritual father. Our spiritual fathers will guide us through the most difficult times in our lives and struggles of our life. They will help our training so that we will get better every day. Now, only way this is possible is if we meet with our coach regularly, with our spiritual father regularly, through Holy Confession, through counseling, and I assure you, you will be strong Orthodox Christians by following their instruction. You'll be great athletes. And let me say one more thing. That's not the only coach. The spiritual father is not the only coach. When you look at any type of team, right? There's strength training coach, there's this coach, there's that coach, there's a mental health coach, there's all these things, right? We are that for each other. We also can lean on one another and become each other's role models and coaches to help us get to the next goal, to be Christ-like, and lean on each other for encouragement and maybe even for guidance. And there is a coach back there. When I typed in coach on Google, that's what came up. I was running out, that space was empty, so I had to fill it with something. I put the coach back there, right? Going back to this for a second. One thing about the Malanga Orthodox Church is this, right? We take our feast days very seriously. Do you agree? Right? Especially the feast days of our church, of saints. This feast day is no exception. The Feast of St. Gregorios. As Malanga Orthodox Christians, we look forward to these days. Children are excited. Parents are excited. The entire church is waiting because of the excitement. We make sure that the church is properly cleaned, right? And of course, we're ready for the day. We make sure that the flag is hoisted and everything's ready for our celebration. We get ready for our rasa and everything that's properly coordinated, right? There's a lot of things, right? And these are all very, very important things. And they are very good traditions of our church. But we have to ask ourselves, why do we have so much of this emphasis on this day? We really have to ask ourselves that. Are we just there for the sake of being there, just to party? Or is there something else? Why is there such emphasis on the Bidinal of our church? It's not just a celebration, but today and this week, we actually make a promise to the church. It's a form of dedication. It's interesting that we're having this talk on the eve of the Sunday of dedication, right? We as members of this parish are vowed to be dedicated to follow in the footsteps of the saints, specifically St. Gregorios of Padua. Now, this is what it's all about. It's not just a day of celebration, but a day that we vow to follow the footstep of our Holy Father, St. Gregorios. Now, it's easy to say that, I know, but very, very difficult to do so. Now, I'm sure you guys have attended numerous Pedalons before, and you've heard numerous times of the life of Padre Benedetto, right? And year after year, we hear about it. And it may go in one year and come out the other. But this year in our lives, we have to take it a step further. Not just hear it and let it go, but this year, what we learn, we put into practice. Church Pedalons are typically celebrations of the saints, mostly because these saints are considered martyrs of the church. Well, typically when you think of martyr, what do you think of? Yeah.
People who died for Christ.
Very good, right? People who died for Christ, people who died for our faith. That is correct. Martyrs die for the faith, and usually we think it's some type of persecution, right? Usually that's what we think. But not all saints, not all martyrs shed blood. Meaning it's not mandated for physical harm to occur. Now, St. Gregorios is a martyr, but he didn't shed blood like the other apostles. But he stands one among the apostles, one among the saints. And why is he a martyr? It's because of that word sacrifice. Because he sacrificed himself for God. When we typically think of martyrs, we see they sacrifice their physical bodies for their faith. St. Gregorios did the same thing. He sacrificed not only his body by his fasting, but also his will for God. That's the key to the martyrs. Sacrificing not only their bodies, but their will. Surrendering their will to God. That is what made them holy. It wasn't just that they sacrificed their bodies, but they sacrificed their will. Instead of focusing on what they alone wanted. They converged what they wanted to what was set forth by God with the will of God. The faith of their love for God was more important than their love for themselves. And if you think about physical athletes like DeMar DeRozan, LeBron, Jordan, Kobe, whoever it may be, all of these individuals, when it came to their sport, they sacrificed all of their time to perfect their craft. It's the same thing when it comes to spiritual athletes, the saints. They sacrificed so much, everything that they could, to become Christ-like, to make that connection with God.
So, they did some of their time to God so they could pray.
Yeah, that's part of what they did. They sacrificed their time so they can pray. And they also, let's say there was someone that was sick, they sacrificed their time to go help that sick person. That's a form of prayer. That's a form of prayer. When we think of prayer, we always think it always has to start with Holy art thou, O God, and end with Nicene Creed. Not always the case. Your love for one another is a form of prayer. It is a form of prayer. Now, remember this, right? You guys remember this? This is how, all these things, this is how St. Gregorios began his journey to become Christ-like. It's how he took steps to perfect his spiritual life, to be like Christ. And if we too want to walk this path, we too have to follow these steps. And all these aspects of the spiritual athletes are the tools that our beloved saint used to become closer to God. Now, St. Gregorios was a person who took much time to study the faith, right? To practice the faith, to fast, and of course, he had a spiritual father that guided him. That's how important a spiritual father is in our lives. We have someone to hold us accountable and to guide us towards Christ. Because of his enthusiasm for the church, he was actually, he was ordained as a subdeacon at the age of 10. At the age of 10. And lived, it was 5, I'm sorry. And 5? Oh, I'm going to have 5 minutes. So, Antony is the greatest example because he prayed daily. I want to look over one thing. This is a slide of his schedule. Yeah. I want to bring one thing. This is his schedule, right? There are some differences in some of the schedules that were posted. It's kind of insane. He was up at 4 in the morning praying, and he was up teaching seminarians, private prayers, administrative responsibilities as a bishop. These are all the things that Antony was doing on a daily basis. Anything find a common theme here?
A lot of prayer. A lot of prayer.
A lot of prayer. But you know what else you find here? Kind of interesting. If you look at it, all of his responsibilities, whether it be teaching, whether it be administrative responsibilities, or Bible study, or whatever it was, everything that he did work-wise, he only began with prayer. Look at it. Teaching seminarians, he prayed before. Teaching seminarians, private prayer. Teaching responsibilities, teaching seminarians, always private prayer, right? Whatever he did, there's always prayer before it. No matter what it is, he always had prayer. And when you ask why did Antony do this? Why did Antony do this? Well, let me tell you something. He used the strength that he got from prayer to do all of his daily activities. If you think that Antony was never overwhelmed, or if he was never stressed out or anxious, you'd be wrong. He was human just like we were, that we are. He felt anxiety, he felt stress, and he felt pain just like we do. What are we supposed to take from this? One huge reason. We live busy lives like this, maybe not as busy as this, right? But we have a lot of things going on. School, work, family, friends, sports teams, music, art, SAT, SAT2s, ACT, MCAT, NCLEX, PANCE exam, all these things, right? And there's so much going on, and we can feel overwhelmed at times, especially when there are so many expectations in our lives. But what I want you to take away from all of this is one thing, is that Antony's life, what set him apart was his time in private prayers. That's what set him apart. And especially his time in silence. That's what he was doing during his private prayers. He was sitting in silence. And it's a great, great tool that we can use to wipe away or at least calm down the anxiety in our lives. And there's a really good story that I can give you to show you how powerful silence is in our lives. Anybody ever heard of ice houses before? Anybody know what an ice house is? It's like an igloo. It's like an igloo, right? So basically these ice houses, let's say this is this room, right? This room. But there's no windows, tightly fitted doors, and it's just, what they do is, in the winter times, they take these ices from the lakes, from the trees, and they put it into this room. This was way before the time of refrigerators. They would put their food in these places so that nothing would spoil, right? But you can't hear anything and it's dark. Now the reason why I tell you this is because there's a story. There was a man who was working in an ice house like this, and he had a watch. He was working very hard in the ice house that one day, and he lost the watch. Now the watch had a great sentimental value to him. So he was upset. So he had all of his friends and colleagues, workers, look in the ice house and they found nothing. So he went home upset. And his family found out, and he had a small daughter, 8 years old. She heard about it and she was very upset that her dad lost his watch, and she wanted to find it for him. One night, in the middle of the night, she snuck out of her home. I don't suggest anybody do that.
We don't know.
She snuck out of her home and she went to this ice house. She closed the door behind her. She went in. Several moments later, she came out with the watch in hand. Now you may be asking, how is that possible? What did she do? What was so special about this young little girl that so many adults couldn't find?
Because she kept silent so she could hear the ticking of the watch.
So you see, what she did is, she went into the room, closed her eyes, and sat in the middle of the room. And she sat in silence. And in the silence, she heard the ticking of the watch. And as she heard the ticking of the watch, she walked closer. And then she stopped and closed her eyes and listened again. And heard the ticking. Closer and closer and closer until she had it in her hand. That's the same thing what happens when you have silence in prayer. Whatever stress or whatever noise is happening in your life, whatever stress or anxiety that you're feeling, whatever test that you have or whatever overwhelming feelings that you have, take some time in silence and listen. Now, when we think of God coming to us or God speaking to us, we always think of Angel Gabriel coming to say, Mary, Mary, you have found favor with God, lightning, angels, right? It's not always the case. Sometimes it could be a soft voice, but we have to listen for it. And it can even happen in the context of your spiritual father or even a brother or sister that you're with. But we have to listen for it. And that's one thing that I'm going to ask all of you to do. Every day, 5 minutes. Put a timer on your watch and just sit in silence. You can say the Jesus prayer and listen. Listen for God. Listen for Christ's voice to guide you through the most difficult of times, and you will feel so much better. So much better, whatever anxiety that you're feeling. And you will also come watch in hand. But we gotta take the time. I'm not gonna lie, the 5 minutes is gonna feel like an hour. Especially when you first started, you're like, when I first started, I was like, oh my God, when is this gonna be over? As of 5 minutes, it's been 30 seconds, right? And why am I saying all this? It's because of really this. This is said to us during the benediction, right? Our brethren and beloved ones, as we entreat you into the grace and mercy of the Holy and Glorious Trinity, with the provisions and blessings you have received from the atoning altar of our Lord, depart in peace, right? This is what it is. With the provisions and blessings which you have received from the atoning altar of the Lord. The interesting thing is this, right? This is what's said at the end of every Kurbana, right? Provisions and blessings, meaning the Holy Kurbana. But guess what? Depart in peace. This is a command. Christ is sending you out on a journey. Just as Christ sent out the apostles, every Sunday, every Kurbana that we go out to, we are being sent out into the world on a journey. He said, basically, take what you need and go. And spread the gospel of Christ. That's what Bada Bada did. And that's what we are called to do. But it all starts with prayer. It all starts with taking time in our lives, with sacrifice and being the spiritual athlete. And we go out into the world and bring these blessings into the world around us. All glory and honor to the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, unto God forever and ever. Amen.